I was holding the papers in my hands. 41 years of my life right there. 41 years of missed dinners, early mornings, late nights where I fell asleep at my desk and woke up with pen marks on my face. 41 years of building something from absolutely nothing, and I was about to sign it over to my son. The pen was already uncapped. The lawyer was already waiting. My coffee thermos was sitting right there on the kitchen counter, still hot, still steaming. Everything felt right. Everything felt like the moment I had been working toward my whole life. And then someone knocked on my door. 3 knocks. Quiet, almost nervous. I opened it, and there was my neighbor, Dale. 60-something years old, retired, not a dramatic man. Not a man who bothers people. He's the kind of neighbor who waves from the driveway and minds his business. Always. But his face that morning, his face was different. He leaned in close, looked over my shoulder, and he whispered, "Please don't drink from that thermos." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. I just stood there, pen still in my hand, looking at this man I'd known for 11 years, watching his eyes, which were dead serious and a little scared. He said, "Just trust me, please." And then he stepped back, like he almost regretted saying it. I didn't drink. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because what unfolded in that house over the next hour? If this story reaches your city, you may never look at the people sitting at your own dinner table the same way again. I mean that. Now let me take you back, because to understand that morning, you have to understand everything that came before it. I started my company with $4,000 and a truck that broke down twice a week. My wife, Carol, she packed lunches for me every single morning because we couldn't afford for me to eat out, not even fast food. She ironed my one good shirt every Sunday night so I'd look presentable for client meetings. We lived in a house so small our bedroom was also the office. The desk was 3 feet from the bed. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you so you understand what that company meant to me, what it cost. We lost a baby during those years. We almost lost the marriage too. There were nights Carol cried in the kitchen thinking I was asleep, and I lay in that bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was destroying my family chasing something that might never come. But it came, slowly, then suddenly, the way real things grow. By the time my son Ryan was in high school, we had 12 employees. By the time he graduated college, we had over 60. He came into the business at 24. And I want to tell you, that was one of the proudest days of my life, watching my boy walk into the building I built, carrying a briefcase, ready to learn. He was good. He was sharp. He had my instincts and Carol's people skills, which is a dangerous combination in the best possible way. I started handing him more responsibility, more decisions. He earned every bit of it. I was at peace. And then he brought home Melissa. Melissa was beautiful, polished, the kind of woman who always said the right thing at the right moment. She laughed at everyone's jokes. She remembered birthdays. She brought food when people were sick. She called Carol Mom within the first 6 months. Carol loved her immediately. I liked her. I want to be honest. I genuinely liked her in the beginning. She felt like a gift, like our family was finally complete. They got married on a Saturday in September. It was a perfect day. I danced with Carol until my knees ached and I didn't care. I gave a toast that made half the room cry. I meant every word. But somewhere in the months after the wedding, something started shifting so slowly I almost didn't notice. Almost. The first thing was the way she ended phone calls when I walked into a room. Not hanging up fast or acting guilty, just transitioning. Smooth, like she'd been trained to. 1 second she'd be talking, the next second she'd be smiling at me, phone already face down on the table. Natural as breathing. I told myself it was nothing. Privacy. Everyone deserves privacy. Then there were the stares, long ones, not warm ones, the kind where you look up and catch someone watching you, and they smile just a half second too late. You know what I mean? That smile that comes after the calculation, not before it. I noticed the way she watched me sign documents. She'd be in the room for other reasons, standing near the kitchen, seemingly distracted. But her eyes always found my hands, my pen, the papers on the table. I told myself I was being paranoid. This was my son's wife. This was family. Ryan started changing too. Not dramatically, not all at once. It was subtle. He started asking more questions about the business structure, who owned what percentage, what the succession plan looked like legally. He'd always been involved, so at first it felt natural, but the questions started having a different flavor. Less curiosity, more inventory. One evening I walked past the den and they were whispering. The moment they heard my footsteps, the conversation stopped. Ryan looked up and smiled. Melissa didn't even flinch. She just picked up her wine glass like nothing happened. I kept excusing it. I kept telling myself, this is what you wanted. You wanted your son in the business. You wanted your family close. Stop looking for problems that aren't there. But Dale was watching. My quiet, retired, mind-his-business neighbor was watching things I was too close to see. He told me later he'd seen Melissa outside twice in the early morning hours. Not jogging, not getting the mail, just standing near the property line on her phone. And once, he said she looked up and caught him watching through his window. She didn't look embarrassed. She held eye contact, and then she smiled. Dale said it bothered him. He didn't know why. He said it was just a feeling, the kind you can't explain but can't ignore. He kept watching. That morning, the morning with the papers, started like any other. Carol was visiting her sister out of state. She'd been gone 2 days. Ryan and Melissa had come over the night before, supposedly to have dinner together before the big signing. It was going to be official the next day, but Ryan suggested we celebrate early. That felt right. That felt like something my son would do. Melissa cooked a full meal. She was warm, funny, attentive. She poured wine. She asked about Carol. She asked about the early days of the company like she genuinely wanted to hear the stories. I sat at my own kitchen table feeling like the luckiest man alive. Before I went to bed, I filled my thermos for the morning, just like I always do. Hot coffee, black, 2 sugars. I set it on the counter, then I went to sleep. I didn't know Melissa was still awake. When Dale knocked on my door that morning, something made me stay calm. I don't know why. Maybe the way his voice was so quiet. Maybe the way he looked almost frightened. Whatever it was, something in me said, don't react. Don't let anyone know this conversation happened. I nodded. I thanked him. I closed the door. I walked back into the kitchen. Melissa was at the table looking at her phone. She looked up and smiled. Morning. Did someone knock? Just Dale, I said. Wanted to know if I'd seen his dog. She nodded and looked back at her phone. I walked to the counter. I picked up my thermos. I opened it, pretended to take a sip without actually letting a drop touch my lips. Then I set it down. I said, Melissa, did you make a pot? I'd love some fresh coffee too. She stood up. Of course. She turned to the coffee maker with her back to me. And in that moment, with my hands shaking just barely enough to feel, but not enough to see, I switched my thermos with hers. She had brought a travel mug, same size, same color almost. She'd been drinking from it all morning. Now she was drinking from mine. I sat down at the table. I picked up the newspaper. I made myself breathe normally. 5 minutes passed. Then Melissa stood up suddenly. Her chair scraped hard against the floor. She grabbed the edge of the table. She said, I don't feel right, and my stomach dropped to the floor. Not because I was surprised, because I realized she had actually done it. She actually had. I called 911 immediately. Whatever was happening, whatever she had put in that thermos, I was not going to let someone die in my kitchen. I want to be clear about that. Revenge was never about harm. Not for me, not for a second. The paramedics came. She was sick but stable. She said she thought it was something she ate. She said it clearly and quickly, like a line she'd rehearsed for a different situation. Ryan got there 20 minutes later, and the look on his face when he walked in. I have replayed that moment 10,000 times, because it wasn't horror. It wasn't pure panic. It was calculation, a flash of it, just 1 second. And then the mask went back on and he was the worried husband, grabbing her hand, talking to the paramedics. But I saw it. I had spent a lifetime reading rooms and reading people, and I saw it. He knew something was wrong with the plan. He just didn't know what had gone wrong yet. I said nothing. I hugged my son. I told him I was relieved she was okay. I offered to reschedule the signing for when everything settled down. He said, "Yeah, of course, Dad, of course." He couldn't hide the relief in his voice. That afternoon after they left, I sat alone in my kitchen for a long time. I called my lawyer, not the one who had been preparing the transfer papers, a different one, an old friend who'd known me for 20 years. I told him everything. He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said, "Don't sign anything, don't say anything, and don't let them know you know." I said, "I know." He said, "I mean it. This has to be done right, not fast, right." Over the next 3 weeks, I moved carefully, quietly. I had the thermos tested. I won't tell you exactly what was found in it, but what I will tell you is that it was enough. It was more than enough. I met with my lawyer multiple times. I restructured certain elements of the company in ways that would have been blocked if the transfer had gone through. I updated documents. I had conversations with people inside the business. People I trusted, people who'd been with me from the beginning, and I started paying attention differently. I learned that Melissa had been meeting with a separate attorney for 4 months. 4 months, consulting about business acquisition, about what a transfer of ownership meant for a spouse who was legally part of the receiving party. I learned that there had been conversations, plural, between Ryan and that attorney as well. It hadn't been impulse. It hadn't been a moment of greed. This was a plan, a real plan, thought out, researched, timed to happen while Carol was away and I was alone and feeling sentimental about legacy. I sat with that truth for a long time. The son I had danced with at Little League games, the son I had driven to college and hugged in a parking lot, crying in my car alone on the way home because I was so proud. That son had sat across from me at my own dinner table and let this happen. Maybe he told himself it wasn't really hurting me. Maybe he convinced himself that the company would be his eventually anyway. Maybe Melissa convinced him of things I'll never know. But he knew enough to have said something. He could have come to me. He chose not to. That was his choice, and choices have consequences. The meeting I called was framed as a routine business review. Ryan came in prepared to talk quarterly numbers. Melissa wasn't there. My lawyer was. So was our CFO and 2 board members who had been with me since the early years. I sat at the head of the table the way I had always sat. Calm, quiet, in control. I placed a folder in front of Ryan. He opened it. He looked at the first page, and the color left his face. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't pound the table. I said, "I think you should read all of it before you say anything." He got to the 3rd page and he looked up at me. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw my son again. Not the man in that room, my boy. And it broke something in me that I'm not sure ever fully healed. But I held steady. I said, "I built that company for 41 years. I built it for this family. And I want you to understand something clearly. You will not have it this way. You will not have it at all. Not now. Maybe not ever. That decision belongs to me. It will always belong to me until I say otherwise." He started talking, explaining, deflecting. He said Melissa had acted alone. He said he didn't know how far she'd gone. He was sorry. He was so sorry. Maybe some of that was true. Maybe. But sorry doesn't undo 4 months of planning with a private attorney. Sorry doesn't undo what was in that thermos. Sorry is a word. I've learned to watch what people do, not what they say. Ryan was removed from his operational role, not fired, not publicly humiliated, simply restructured out. An arrangement was made, a fair one, financially, but the path to ownership that had been open to him closed that day, quietly, permanently. Melissa, I was told by my attorney, is facing her own set of consequences through proper legal channels. I'll leave it at that. I went to see Dale the following Saturday morning, brought him coffee and a box from the bakery Carol loves. We sat on his porch for almost 2 hours. He told me what he'd seen through his window. He said he'd almost talked himself out of knocking on my door. He said he was scared of being wrong, scared of being the nosy neighbor who caused a family disaster over a feeling. I told him he hadn't caused anything. I told him he'd just turned on a light in a room that needed light. He nodded. He looked at his coffee cup. He said, "I just didn't think it was right." 6 words, that's simple. 6 words that may have saved everything. I've thought a lot about where I failed. And I did fail, in some ways. I got so focused on building something to leave behind that I forgot to pay attention to what was growing around me. I saw what I wanted to see in my son. I mistook performance for character, and that's on me. But here is what I know now that I didn't know then. Trust is not a gift you give someone because they're family. Trust is something you watch someone earn over time, with consistency, with honesty, with the courage to tell you what you need to hear, even when it costs them something. Dale wasn't family. Dale was a neighbor I waved at from a driveway, and Dale was the only one who told me the truth. That tells you everything you need to know about where trust actually lives. The company is still mine. Every brick of it, every year of it. I go in most mornings, still. I have good people around me now. People I've watched carefully. People who have shown me over time who they actually are. Carol came home and I told her everything. We sat at that kitchen table together for a long time. She cried. So did I, if I'm honest. Not from anger, from grief. There's a difference. Anger burns fast. Grief teaches you something if you let it. We're still here, still standing. The table is still ours. And I never did sign those papers. If this story touched something in you, subscribe and leave a like, and tell me where you're watching from. I read more of those comments than you'd think, because sometimes knowing someone out there heard you, that matters more than you'd expect.